I'm watching a recital from Fredonia.
What instrument? Or,
It's actually his voice, but I thought he's jazz studies. He's the one who came in third on The Voice.
oh,
So believe me, as an alumni, there was a lot of,
yeah, I bet.
everything was coming to us, Facebook, people like, okay, we gotta follow Lucas, he's still in. And then it said, and here you go, it's a senior recital tonight, here's the link.
Hi.
Hi, good, how are you?
Okay. How you doing?
All right, I do.
Tell me your name again.
Tyler.
Tyler. Thanks.
Everything is set. And there were some extra papers from
Yeah, that's
last
good.
week,
Yeah.
so I saved them in here. and
Thank you so much. Yes.
I was like, good, because
Yeah,
then I couldn't figure out what I did with mine.
Oh, so you have a copy?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we actually will read it today. It'll be fun.
Yeah,
It'll be fun.
I'm just waiting to see if.
Or hopefully it'll be fun.
It will be fun.
Could be. It was fun.
Yeah.
Is there other folks on Zoom?
Not yet,
Okay.
because I wait to just see it.
Yeah.
You want me to hold your water?
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Yeah.
In 1991, I was a senior at UR. We were pretty new. A friend of mine, Marty Rombelt, who was a religious photographer.
Yeah.
She was like, you should get your
Yeah.
class. And I actually was there one day, and it's like, I was trying to figure out what my. For good, now she's a doctor. She went to med school. She went and spent time in the little medical school requirements to do that.
Very cool.
Yeah, but so I did, like, I wish I had, but like, I had a lot of choices for free electives, and I don't know any, because I didn't really need to. So I never took your class, even though like I wanted to.
Oh,
So when I saw this, I'm like, oh, wait,
Great.
I can do a mini version
Yeah.
30 years later.
How
We talked, I mean, we were on Facebook together, but yeah, he's great. He's a very good kid, and they said he's from a holistic doctor.
Yeah.
In Albany, no, in Vermont.
Yeah.
How long? So she's been working together.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah, we were both on the. Human
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
I made that magazine a million
The
times.
norm, yeah.
I made it run a million times.
Oh, that's true.
Because
Yeah.
I said obnoxious things, especially about psychology.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, no, she was editor chief, I was managing it.
Oh, really? That's great.
Yeah.
I don't page myself.
Oh, I think I remember.
Okay.
And there's so many other people, like I'm actually, of all the people you are friends, they're the most I'm connected to with that staff.
Yeah, that's cool. They were funny.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a
He
random.
died like midnight, died like 2 years after.
Oh, really? Now, do you tell me your name?
Jeremy, sir. Yeah. But I want to tell you the story. I was like, when I saw this, I'm like, oh, it's
Oh, yeah. It's 100 years later.
It's 100 years later. So, yeah, finally.
Yeah.
Oh, you know.
But.
How you doing? Good, how are you?
They left me here.
No, I'm not looking at my sabbaticals. I got those fingers for that. The main thing I did.
Cleveland Polar. So if you were in Yankee Stadium,
But I
you
actually.
could literally see the guy,
I
see the other
film.
teams. Because it's right across the river.
Right.
Like it was literally.
Yeah, like literally, I spent the fall for 10 years, I think I was across the country. So I did about, I just looked up today. I did about $60. And now, I mean, I've edited the thermal side.
Okay.
But I'm a Saxon.
It's awesome. Good night to you.
I did, no, not at all, I just learned about.
Hi.
And this is a blacker thing, I don't think I realized how, the conservative movement, which is like, a big statement I didn't tell them know, so it's actually more, it's more, like there's more prayers, than like, than there are. Well, like, look at you.
And it's not because the rabbi. Because most
Did you grow up here? Did you grow up in the?
Yeah, I grew up in the Rochester area.
It's very, they're really.
Not connected to the bar so much as RIP. Parents live there, mother residence. But actually, my grandmother worked at their med school.
So you
But it was,
do Wednesdays?
yes, it was very.
Yeah, and then like Wednesdays and Thursdays.
So that's, I'm still at the narrow.
And you still have like read about this?
Yeah, and now at least it's not like.
It's cool.
Figure my head.
The original bits were really cool. Only what, 13 episodes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, they don't wanna.
It did exactly.
Only a little bit like of anime stuff that I ever got into. Yeah, I mean, it just wasn't my jam. I was a little too late for it.
Yeah, I never got super into it. I mean, I got this and then Akira.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so that's kind of new for me as well.
It's
It's helpful.
gonna be right.
It's just, it's not just some.
Yeah.
We stared anyway. Maybe this was just us. They're Meters down there.
I'm watching slower. Oh, yeah, people in trouble.
Well.
We're scheduled until what time? 8:30, okay,
Yeah, I didn't.
we won't keep yet.
Leave it back.
Okay, I'll make sure.
It has assignment that I haven't done my assignment, except one of the books I did, find a sort of movie about. And so it's like, that part's of sort of movie.
Stuff going on.
I got way into
Somebody else.
the woman who wrote the music.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
That was music. It was off the charts. Guy went to college, but
Time for.
it's a Japanese star and knows her.
Oh, wow. They're called is, that is by.
An old guy now, but he's really good,
You know.
like kick-ass jazz.
Wait a minute.
He was an interesting guy.
Yes, yeah. And which one was the semester still had that light in it. That was okay. People are.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, well, there you go. See it?
I like him. Just I think this is.
Somebody is looking.
Take that down and look roughly.
I don't know.
It's getting, yeah.
It's like to,
You know, it's a good, it's a good like. Yeah.
And he's on tour.
yeah, I just heard someone do segment.
Yeah,
You said it was yoga.
something like that. I just put a couple of these off. Oh, no. Oh, and then, I think that's in there.
That's all I've read.
You said you knew Bill Green. He-
Oh, very well, yeah.
Oh,
He hired me.
yeah, his, know him too, because his wife Rebecca.
Yes.
Dean and,
Oh, look,
yeah, my
Yeah.
husband.
Just waiting to see if something.
I-
That's what we.
yeah, Bill hired me in '86.
Yeah.
And I was young.
He's not there.
No, he went to Miami about 15 years ago, maybe. So he founded our department.
Oh, he found it. Yeah. I
Yes.
he left here.
Yeah, and I was his like second hire.
Mhm.
He kind of culled some folks who were there. And then there were two of us that were hired in the same year, but I was the second guy. And he took a chance, but he hired young people. He was a cool guy. He was good to me. He said, I'm not gonna tell you what to do to publish your parish. Exactly what he said. Like he laid it right out. He was real honest. And then he became a dean. That kind of corrupts you because can't not be corrupted because you're a
Yeah,
student.
she left. She went, didn't she go to one of the assistant highlights or honors? I can't remember.
Well, I know they went to Miami. Yeah, he became pro, he was like vice president. So he was a student of Jacob Neusner. He wrote prolifically. One of the greatest guys. Usner, Athens, East Smith, Bill Green. There's also, they had something to say.
Well, he was the religion department at Hobart.
Wow.
But, and he was a religious.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
You go to the JCC.
Not as much as I'm supposed
They
to.
have their.
Yes, because that's where it said it was gonna be. There, so I was like, oh, I guess I better go there and find out.
Don't take our sense.
Soon, 15th.
Yeah, we're prompt. You wanna start on time? How you doing? Good. Did it scare everybody away?
No, the weather,
The weather.
probably stopped snowing.
It did. Yeah, I did. You know, that third winter was last week, right? So that's what I usually call it, and fall, spring, and now it looks like spring is too early. Doesn't it seem too early to you? Yeah, like lilacs are gonna come and it's not May. That's not good.
Right, yes.
Yeah. I used to measure my whole life by, I used to live next to the lilac park on Island. But there's a series of cherry trees in a courtyard at the U of R. And traditionally I teach a history of Chinese and Japanese philosophy and cultural thought every spring. It's called From Confucius to Zen. And it's really a great good time. And it's a kind of course where even if I'm bad, it's good. You know, because like, how can you screw this up? Like, it's just so good. But of course, it's cherry blossom time in Japan now, and it's a big deal, you know, because they get like 5 good weeks of weather in Japan. It's like Rochester, you know, it's like they get a little spring and a beautiful fall, but summers are miserably hot and it rains. Japan's a tough place to live, yeah. But there are these cherry trees in the courtyard, and they've not only come, they've gone. And that's not good. I'm not at Zen yet. I got 2 more classes. Like the cherry trees.
Days, because I kept going every week to see where the cherry's ready. And I even
Right.
went out to Herd Orchard and there wasn't a cherry open.
Right.
And today and they're all over, you know, it was like those few warm days, they all bloomed and then they all fell.
And I live in Bristol down by the mountain, like up on top of the hill. So we're a week and a half behind. Everything, it's snowy there, you know, much more. We get the first snow and the last snow. Anyway, welcome. Thanks for coming back. I hope you had sort of fun, interesting time last time, for what it was. I want to I have an idea of what we want to talk about, but I just want to really invite you to talk, you know, like query, question, ask anything you want. You know, I'm a good lifeline for Jeopardy. Like I'm a back of a baseball kind of guy, baseball card kind of guy. I mean, I was trained in the comparative study of religions in a way in which it's really not done anymore. So, you know, we sort of went through all of those sort of phases and years of well, I'll give you one good example. One of the prerequisite PhD exams, they were called the general examinations for the PhD. This was before you wrote a dissertation or anything. It was called the history question. And you walked into the room and on a 3x5 card, it gave you a century. And it could be any century from really hoary antiquity to, in those days, the 20th, right? And you had to write about 5 religions on 3 continents from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So you're kind of dropping a pin on the world, going, it's 8:53. Do you know where your gods are? You know, like you're asking, but what it really did is it gave you a view of history and of the world where you did ask the human questions. You know, what were the social historical circumstances of folks? How did they get there? Where were they in their own encompassing view of themselves, of the cosmos? What were their technologies? What were their histories? How did they sort of organize themselves? Who did they think they were? And what had happened to them? So I welcome all those kinds of queries and questions, and I love to think in forests, not just in trees, if that makes sense. So So, and so let's talk about the ancient world. And let's talk about, I want to take us back to India because we talked a lot about a lot of things, but we really didn't read the poetry last time. And I kind of want to make sure we do that. That's sort of typical of me. Just sort of get off on something, next thing you know, like we're jagging around. And I promise we will. But one of the things that's so interesting about the history of India is that, of course, it's as the subcontinent has the tallest mountains in the world. It has deserts in the west. It's got formidable oceanic boundaries, and yet it is a crossroads of civilization. Just about everyone has been there. There was in the first and second centuries of our era, before the third century, before the fall of Rome, there was a vibrant Jewish community in Malabar, in Kerala. There's the remnants of a synagogue and folks who kind of hang around there in Kerala nowadays. They're not particularly observant. They're kind of very sort of interested and curious about that it's still there. The evangelism of first and second century Christianity landed in deep South India. I think I told you a little bit about this last time. In the first and second century with Thomas the Apostle, the famous doubter, my favorite disciple. He's the show me the money guy. So that's a good joke too. So from a different world. Anyway, and you could still find Roman coins on the beach when I was a kid. So there's been an enormous amount of checking in on the world, and of course the history of the ancient subcontinent is a history of migrations, and so that's where we were last time. Now so I want to go back to a pre-Hindu world, and to the oldest poetry that world created. Now, one of the key features so those songs and stories are contained in what's called the Rig Veda. The Rig Veda, so the word Veda there is cognate. You really know what that word means? Let's do that one for a second. Yeah, like we told you, right? So cognate is when one word is connected to another, but you have to go back, but they didn't learn it from each other. So the word Veda, its closest cognate would be the Greek, say, oida. You would find it in the Latin veritas, in the English veridical, or in the English verify. So exactly, yeah, and in the sense of verification. So that's another interesting point, because ancient India really makes a distinction, which also we still sustain, because they have that verb to know. That's a truth verb, right? But they also have the jnana. They call it jnana. We call it knowledge. The Greeks called it gnosis, right? And the difference between let's use the Sanskrit words, between Veda and jnana, that is between verify and knowing, is a really interesting and kind of critical starting point for this conversation. Because we're really talking about two different ways in which we experience truth. The knowledge verb is understood to be, and we'll see it turn up here in the poetry in a beautiful way. The knowledge verb is understood to be something that is already true. It's the state of affairs. So knowledge is, we're gonna give it a fancy term. It's an ontological category. It's a category of being. Like knowledge is the way things are, and whether we actually know that or not, or whether we can appreciate that, or whether we have any connection to it or not, it wouldn't make it less true. So knowledge, please.
When you say we're gonna go before the Hinduism.
Yes.
What years are we?
Okay, so we're going to begin with the folks who begin the migrations that bring us this poetry. That would be 2800 before the Christian era. They're going to land in the subcontinent between 1800 and 1500 before the Christian era. So about 4,000 years ago. we're gonna mark the difference between these Vedic worlds, which I will call pre-Hindu because they genuinely are, and I'll kind of show you why and why that's an interesting idea, and then how they become Hindus. And so let's date this poetry that we're going to look at about 1500 before the Christian era. Now, pause there. One of the things that makes ancient India and much of East Asian religion the way it is that almost all of those cultures, I think without fail, are what we would call golden age cultures. And what we mean by that is they're always thinking older is better, right? So, so it's morning in America, that big lie too. So, sorry, but they're, and they are genuinely not just sentimental. They don't just feel deeply about the past. They're nostalgic. They ache for it. They wish it were. And they almost invariably see time as entropic. That is to say, things are getting worse. and in the Indian case, Murphy was an optimist. So, because things are not only kind of declining and decaying and unraveling, but just when you can't think it can't get any worse, it does, right? So, but they do have a very kind of, how should we say, rooted notion in antiquity, in the value of antiquity, and in the truth of their poets, their visionaries, their sages, their folks. And in that, I would also say that not only is older better, and it's a way of thinking that compels them always to push things further back. So if you ask, so a kind of devout Hindu might say the Veda is 10,000 years old. I've been at conferences where that happens. And my whole being just wants to go, no. Can we start over? Could we produce a little evidence? Could you show me why? And the real question isn't whether that's true or false. The real question is, why would they want to think that? That's the much more interesting question, right? Not because the forensics of this are beyond dispute. Just like these folks who brought this ancient poetry to India, the Veda, which modern political India also disputes as migratory. So contemporary Hindu nationalism wants this Vedic language, and its subsequent forms. So out of this Vedic language, which is Indic, which is Indo-European, as I said last time, we'll take you all the way back to the Donbass, all the way back to the Ukraine, to Proto-Indo-European, and then all the way over to Ireland and the sources of those languages, right? This is beyond dispute. This is a theory the way evolution is a theory. It's called science. It's just something we know, right? It falls into that knowledge verification category, right? So they want to push back the language, and modern political Hindu nationalism, which is okay, I'll be opinionated here because you're my friends. It's a pretty ugly thing. But it also has this kind of nationalist pride. So it not only wants these ancient languages to be indigenous, autochthonous, that's the fancy word. Autochthonous, that's like a Jeopardy word. This is a really good one. Autochthonic, right? Well, think about this. So AUTOCHTHONOUS. That's huge Jeopardy points there. I think about that. Chthonic is the Greek word for earth. So autochthonic, self-earth, and it's a fancy word for indigenous, or like Rocky and Bullwinkle, like people out of the earth, like springing right from the ground, So, and that's not true. I mean, of course, we're all migrants, but these folks who brought this language to India do so between 1800 and 1500 before the Christian era. We'd mark the beginnings of the Hindus closer to 1,800, and I'll be happy, and I want to kind of take us there and show you what makes for that transition. What did they see that changed their world? And how did these origins create that much more dramatically different vision of the universe? How did it evolve over that 1,000 years or so of their internal conversations and their migratory conversations? And who did they meet? And how did that go down? But does that help? Did we put a date on it? Okay, and then just to give you a little bit. So this poetry, maybe 1,500 before the Christian era. And we say that Hindus kind of crystallized between 1000 and 800, now land the historical Buddha around the time of Plato and Socrates, about 500 before the Christian era. For it, like you look it up in the, like in I used to say the Britannica, they would say, you know, Siddhartha Gautama, the historical Buddha, you know, 483 to 560 before the Christian era. Like, I mean, like you go, okay, like we have video, like how do you think you know that, right? And that's one of the things that I do. I kind of like say, well, how do we think we know that? Do you want to know how we date the historical Buddha? It's a really great, because it's a whole kind of piece of how do we think we know things? Because we're on the question of jnana, knowledge, and vidya, Veda, verification. Because again, they're talking about two different kinds of theory. They're using a theory of knowledge that has two different facets. One is there are things that are already true, and how do we access them? So you get to knowledge, you get to jnana, gnosis, in the Greek sense, by vidya, by Veda, by verification, right? So in other words, you have to figure it out. So the verification part is the experimental dusting it up. And the knowledge part is a statement about the nature of reality. Like, this is the way the world is. And that tells you something important also. It tells you something that really is going to contrast the theories of knowledge that Hindus are going to kind of work with from this very ancient world to when we landed with someone like the historical Buddha. Because one of the most important kind of features of the way Buddhists think is that, well, let's land them both together, because the Buddha is a creature of that world. And the way his legend and his story is told is a teaching. So what we ever know about the historical Buddha is also a teaching of Buddhism. So we can't really separate the legend from the character. That would be an important kind of just first way to think about that. But we don't, but to a Buddhist, we don't experience the world. We experience our experience of the world, right? So, and that's not an insane way to think, because everything is processed through our own senses, through our body, through our minds, right? But to make a kind of a glib, interesting, overstated observation, that's part of my job in college. Repeat the obvious and overstate it. In a Buddhist world leans into the subjective. The world is as you make it. So even much later on, like when you heard Gandhi say, "Be the change you want to see in the world," that famous statement, that's very not a Hindu way of thinking about the world. Because Gandhi wasn't really a Hindu. He was really a Jain. He was born in Rajkot, so Maharashtra. He belongs to a different kind of tradition. The Jains are much closer to the Buddhists in a million different ways. Who the Jains are, it's another thing. They're a real ancient tradition of antiquity. They're actually 2 or 3 centuries older than the Buddhists. The Jains are a really interesting story themselves. They give us the whole idea of karma. We can talk about that. When Gandhi talks about non-attachment, and when Gandhi talks about non-injury, these are fundamentally Jain concepts. They come from that tradition. We could talk about why and how they got there, because he's an interesting cat to talk about. But when I say that Buddhists and the Jains lean into the subjective, they want to say the world is as you see it. The world is as, so it's everything is filtered through consciousness, everything is filtered through the mind, everything is filtered through our senses and our critical abilities to sort that out, right? So knowledge starts here in those traditions. But to Hindus, because this word Veda, knowledge starts there. So the basic Vedic Hindu answer to the way the more subjectivist Buddhist traditions think is, you think you're inventing the world. We think the world invented you, right? So no matter, and they're not going to dispute that we invent the world. So everybody's going to agree to that meme, the one that says, you don't experience the world, you experience your experience of the world. The question is the world coming this way, out of you, or is the world coming this way? That is from the world, and you're a creature of it. You're made by it. So are you making the world, or is the world making you? When the world is making you, that's much more like lean into the Hindu side of the equation. It's a much more kind of objective sense of the world. Because one of the questions that they're going to raise in the poetry, and then they're going to settle when they trip over into Hindu worlds, is precisely that. That is the world, what is the world that made us? And how did it make us? And much later on, the Hindus are among the only folks in the history of religions who ever tell us why the world made us. You know, like I've read Genesis 1,000 times and asked this question since I'm 14. And like, you just don't know why God made the world. Like, was it for fun? Like, and then you get a real, and so the question of the origin of the cosmos, like the beginnings of the world, like creation, right? That's the word cosmogony, right? So cosmology, all those ology words, technology, that's all the logos word in Greek. That's the logic word. So technology is logical thinking or sensible, reasonable thinking, logos thinking about tectone, building, like an architect. Get it? So what's technology? It's being rational about making things. That's literally what the word means, right? So cosmology is what's the order of the universe? Like, how does it operate? What is it? How is it put together? What are its rules? What are its patterns? What can we say about it? What do we think we know about it? When we ask the questions of knowing, that's called epistemology. Epistem is the Greek to know, right? But cosmogony turns the question of the order of the universe into the origin of the universe. That is, and again, the creation stories of the Western monotheisms are interesting that way, because they say God created heaven and earth, but we kind of don't know why. Like, or to put it in Jersey terms, where I grew up, like, what's in it for him? Like, he got skin in the game. Like, what do you want? Like, what's up with that guy? You know, like, and later Hindu worlds. I often tell students this, that the Hindu worlds actually originated in New Jersey because they asked the same three questions I was asked growing up. These are the questions that make you know you're a Hindu. You talking to me? Because that's what they want to know. Like, they want to know how the world is talking to you. Like, what's it telling you? Right? You talking to me? Maybe you're not. I don't know. Like, what do you want from me? That's the second question. You talking to me? What do you want from me? And that third question, it comes with what's called a mudra, or a gesture. You know how the Buddha does this or this, but the one in New Jersey goes like this. It goes, you got a problem with that? And once you figure out, like, once you can literally orient around those questions, and it makes a great deal of sense when you think about this. Now, let's fast forward like 2,000 years, because Hindus really do give you a reason. Some think that there's a God, some aren't. We'll figure out about that. But for those that think of the cosmos as having itself an agent of creation, like that, and Hindus have a very interesting later sets of arguments about this that start with a very famous meme. It starts with, pots don't just happen. So, in other words, there might be clay, right? Because that's the material cause of a pot. But the efficient cause of a pot is a potter, right? So could there be a universe without a stuff? Can there be stuff, but not a potter? And the Hindus are going to ask that question later on. Now, the reason, and you can phrase it that way because you'll probably recognize this as a distinction also in Aristotle. So it's not like they're the only folks in the world who ever thought like this, right? They're asking, here's the stuff of the universe. We can ask ourselves where that came from and what it is. Like, okay, like, here's reality. What do we think it is? And then did something, some energy, some force, some deliberate causal agent, some self-conscious did that, like made that, like the pot? That's a later question. Now we fast forward all the way to later interesting Hindu questions. And one of the more interesting answers when those over there, because you have to remember the Hindus are hugely, if whenever you say the Hindus, you have to say, well, which ones and when and what do you think they're saying? Because there's there are not only 330 million gods, there are 330 million ways of thinking about every one of them. And there's just an enormous complexity and diversity of schools and opinions and ideas. And let's pause there because it will take us all the way back here. Think of Hindus as less interested in orthodoxy, that's correct beliefs or correct words, than in orthopraxy, correct actions, correct praxis, right? So, and in that way, I think much of Hinduism kind of looks a lot closer to Jewish traditions, because the Hindus are going to say, well, here's the orientation of the world, like here's the rules, like here's the law, and your job is to understand the law, and to understand that when you conform to the law, it's a mitzvah, like it's a good thing, like there's a whole vocabulary that works the same way for Hindus. But when you go to a Hindu temple, for example, they won't be divided particularly on sectarian formulations. Like it's not like the Methodists are here and the Reformed are there and the Conservatives are there and the Presbyterians are over there. That's not really how Hindu temples work. In fact, in Hindu worlds, they don't really, you have to get to sort of the gritty, interesting theologian, philosopher types who ever ask what you believe. Like if you walked into a Hindu temple and asked the priest, what do you believe? They kind of look at you sideways. And they go, well, that's for you to figure out. Because again, they're deferring from orthodoxy. It's kind of not really where they land. But when you go into a Hindu temple, they go, stand here, don't stand there. Right? And so it's a do this, don't do that tradition. That's also a really interesting way of thinking, we'll talk about this too, if you like, of thinking about the sacred. Because we're going to ask ourselves, what do we mean when they create a sacred cosmos? And I'm going to say they want to think about it in two very different ways. The first is they want to ask the question again of being. And the first simplest answer to a sacred cosmos is yes. Like you got the lucky, you're here, right? Life is a gift, it's a blessing, life is a celebration. And wherever it came from, the first thing to say about life is yes, right? Like my teacher used to call it radical affirmation. And as a praxis or as a view of life, it gets really interesting because then you can sort out morality or human feelings or the way we relate to people by first just saying yes, right? So now go to vices or go to things that are terribly difficult to fathom: fear, hatred, anger, right? And the first kind of Hindu response will be yes. If they couldn't be put to a better purpose, why would you have them? Right? So the saying yes is an invitation to seeing an asset and then saying, now, how does it disable you? How is it a liability? How is it problematic? Right? So when is fear your ally? And when is fear informing you in a creative way or in a healthy way? And when is it crippling you? Right? But the first way to think about that is radical affirmation. Like if you're afraid, go, yep, I'm afraid. Or if somebody really is like venal and selfish and hard and narcissistic and bad hair, sorry, you gotta go, you can say yes to that too. But it's also going to shift sort of much of the question of the problem of evil into a kind of failure to appreciate first principle sacred, which is this was a blessing, this was a gift. Everything you were given as a human is all that you could need to be human. And if you were given it, that is, if the cosmos somehow gave this to you, whether it came from a god, whether it comes from evolution, that's another set of questions. Like how it happened is another set of questions. But everything that constitutes human nature and human endowment somehow can be made an asset. It can be made a creative use. So one of the first things I did when I was living in India, just as a 20-year-old, I went on a college program, and first thing I did was move out and move in by myself. And I'm living over this couch that I told a little bit of this story last time. I went upstairs one night, came home, and found this big comical lock on my door. You know, just like pull on it and it opens. It was all just like very Indian way of being. And like, oh, I have a lock. Yeah, okay. So I go upstairs to my little room. I have 3 rooms, and I never went into the kitchen because the lady down the street would feed me. She was nice, so I could stop by her house and she would feed me. Anyway, I flip on the light and I look like that. And there's something in the kitchen. I get really scared. I walk in the kitchen. I flip on the kitchen light, looking around. Did I tell you this story? I'm looking around, and then I look down, and then there she is under the sink. She's like this. So this is a long way from the San Diego Zoo when you're like on the glass and the cobra comes up. Oh no, she's this far away from me like this.
What was it?
Was a cobra under my sink. Now I'm thinking, okay, first thing I'm gonna have to do is change my clothes. Because yeah. And then I step back gently and race down the stairs, and I go down the street, and there's a guy who has a little shop that looks like a phone booth, and it's like this guy's like Mary Poppins. He's got everything, like, need an umbrella? You know, like this guy's got everything. Like and I go, there's a cobra under my sink. My Tamil at this point is very rudimentary. I'm kind of new there. Don't really speak the language very well. He's like, I'll have a cup of tea. Like, this will be okay. You know, like, so about 20 minutes later, this grandpa comes by on a bicycle with his grandson, holding a burlap bag. And we go back to the house, and the cobra's still under the sink. And grandpa's like literally like, you know, barefoot, just a guy, right? He shakes the bag, and up she comes. And he reaches in and he picks her up and he puts it in the bag. He ties the bag and he hands me the bag. I'm like, right? And then I said, okay, you take the cobra. And he walks outside, he walks through the field, because the house had like a rice field market crossroad. He walks into the field, he lets the cobra out and go. He goes, she may come back. I said, oh, that's comforting. Like, that's a great idea. He goes, so is your fear, the joke, of course, is your fear warranted? And the answer is yes, right? Like, when is fear your ally? And when is it like a crippling, debilitating projection, right? So the first category of the sacred is say yes. And in that way, you'll know what to do, because knowledge, right? Like that's why you're in that knowing, verifying world you're in. And your job is to figure out what the world is doing and how you can optimize that experience.
So what would you do the next time?
All the same guy. Well, because what I found out, of course, is that the snakes are deeply territorial. They're like the little garter snakes in your woodpile. And if you move them, they're not going to survive. And you want them around because they do other things, because they're part of the, like, I live in Bristol, you know, in a cabin kind of house, you know, like a log cabin house. And we finally figured out that we just rent it from the mice. Like we take care of it, like, but you know, and we don't want to do too much damage. They are the vermin. I have a very conflicted relationship with them because like I'm the one, like, I don't know if you've ever, when you trap a little log mouse and it kind of looks at you like, how do you flush this little creature down the toilet? Like, it's just so hard, right? But they are like going to give you disease, and they're dirty, and they're mice, right? Like, and you just want the owls to eat them and everything to be okay. But they do own the place. Like, we live out there. You're just not going to stop them. Like, it's a wooden house in the country. Like, it's not, you know, it's not Teaneck, New Jersey in the suburbs. It's a different thing. You know, like, we're not going to be able to keep the mice out. So it's like the snakes. We can't keep the snakes out. We're going to have to figure out, like, we just live with them. But that too is enough. And that'll take us to the second idea of the sacred. So the first idea of the sacred is the world is sacred. And in some sense, everyone's just trying to make a living. The mice, the snakes, us. And we have the tools to make that living. And some of those, but what makes us human in a particular way is the elevation of our ability to use those tools, right? So later on, in this conversation of poetry, we're going to get the word yoga. The earliest sense of yoga literally means yoking, like yoking cattle to a chariot, to a cart, right? So it means, and the symbol for Hindu marriage is this beautiful little abstract image. It's really two oxen yoked to a cart, right? Because you're pulling the same cart together. It's a very beautiful idea, right? But it means to be engaged and to be disciplined and to kind of figure out the world. Like you're going to have to figure out the world. The owls and the mice and the snakes don't have to. That in some sense, the universe has blessed them with all that they need, but we have to figure it out. Now, the later yoga tradition calls this process of engagement. They're going to call that. I'm going to give it lots of different terms, but they're going to take our elevated ability to know and to verify. We're going to call that the process. We're going to call that process yoga. They're going to talk about that happening in what they call the subtle body. The subtle body just takes our sensual, instinctual, corporate self, our physical self, and it elevates us into a capacity to discern and distinguish and make choices and use our awareness and creativity and intelligence to sort out the world, right? But the basic first premise of the argument is you wouldn't have it if you didn't need it, right? So you wouldn't have anger if you didn't need it. So did you see that wonderful Tom Hanks movie called Bridge of Spies? I'll watch this one because it's really great.
Which movie?
It's called Bridge of Spies. It's a Tom Hanks movie. And it starts in 1957, which is dear to me. That's my year, right? I'm the boomer year. And this it's a story of it's a Cold War story.
Right.
And so they bust this Russian spy. And he's been a Russian spy he's been underground for years, and they bust the Russian spy. And Tom Hanks character is there to defend him in court. Now they want to railroad this guy, and they clearly want to give him the chair, and then it kind of coincides with the Gary Powers story. I don't know if you remember that guy. He was the guy who we had a spy plane, and the Russians captured this guy, and they ended up trading. This is that story. So anyway, so Tom Hanks got this Russian guy, and he's trying to convince this guy that he's his honest defender. Like, here's the law, here's the rules. They want to say, and he says to him, they want to give you the chair. He goes, okay. And then he goes, you don't look upset. And he goes, would that help? Now, from that one line, you've got everything you need to know about the Hindus. And because anger, fear, or compassion or kindness. When are you empowering? When are you enabling? Right? And just go, would that help? So like if you're angry, would that help? And you could say yes, or you could say no, because sometimes like a demonstration of anger or a demonstration of fear or even a demonstration of compassion isn't really compassion. Like but because you're enabling someone's bad habit or something. Like say it's someone you love and they have an addiction, right? Like, how do you be compassionate? Well, would that help? So there is a very sort of pragmatic view of the sacred. It comes from the celebration of life. And it goes, look, you came in the way you did. Now, the next feature of this is we all came in the same way. We're still on the concept of the sacred. But each of us turned out just enough different from the whole history of how each of us moved through this cosmos. So while they are golden agers, they're also thinking that we have all, can hear your inner David Crosby sing, Crosby, Stills and Nash, we have all been here before, right? So when they talk about death and rebirth, it can be very silly, like people think of it silly, but what it really means is we are inevitably the consequence of an innumerable number of causes and effects of the past. Like, think of all the things that had to have happened for your parents to marry, and then for them to marry, and then for them to marry, right? And to go just back through ancestry, all the way through the quarry corridors of time. And in a certain way, you find out you're really related to all kinds of things you never even imagined, So put that in 21st century terms and think of it this way. Like if you had a picture of your grandmother, and then you had a picture, just pick one side of the family, doesn't matter, right? And you had a picture, and every grandmother had a picture of every grandmother. Now go back 65,000 generations, and grandma looks like a fish, right? Like literally, that's what natural selection would tell you, like that's what science would tell you. But and certainly that's where the Hindus want to come from. They want to say this vast matrix of reality is connectivity and causality and conditions and consequence, right? Causality, this made that, if this, then that, like did this, got that, right? Conditions, these are the circumstances, this is what happened, some of which you choose, some of which is chosen for you, some of which you can control, most of which you can't, right? Now you're back into a Hindu world because it made you.
Was this not the idea of reincarnation?
Yes, this is exactly where we're going. This is the idea of karma and reincarnation. So instead of thinking of it like, like once I was Cleopatra or Shirley MacLaine, yeah, me, I was once Shirley MacLaine. It's really this much more subtle notion that we are all connected in this enormity of conditions, causality, and consequences. Some of which are more immediate to us, more proximate to us. Your grandmother looks more like you than your great grandmother. Keep going further back and she doesn't, right? So some are proximate, some are more remote, more exotic, further away, right? But there's no getting past the notion that we're here because that's how we got here. So from this poetry forward, karma, which simply means action, right, refers to causality and conditions and consequences. All the things that had to have happened for things to be whatever it is they are. All their constituent elements, all the ways in which all their properties, like all the things they could be, because of the way they are material, like all the things that the clay and the potter again. Like, oh, what's the stuff? How did it get here? What kind of a stuff is it? It's like looking at the ingredients on a spaghetti jar, tomato. That's one of my favorite things to do. Okay, what did they think? What did they think? My mother was Italian. So what do they think tomato sauce is? They're like, because ingredients matter, right? So there are the ingredients and then there are the chefs. And you are, in some sense, each of us is that architect and that chef of our own consciousness. So they're going to give us back a sense of agency and even a sense of creative autonomy, but they're never going to make us separate or other, right? So the universe, no matter what it is or how it got here, we still haven't answered that question, right? Never alienates us, it can't lose us, right? And it's everything sort of inside the same matrix. This is going to be really important because when we get to the poetry, they're going to, when they talk about gods or demons or things seen and unseen, they're just talking about all the things that are that literally are under the same vault of the sky. We're all in it together. So one of the things that comes through, and we'll see this even in the much later Hindus, is that only in the rarest instances, one of the things you never want to say about the Hindus is always or never, because it's just so weird and there's so much of it, right? But they don't have a creator-creation relationship in which the creator is something else. Like that, to them, that just doesn't make sense. So it's a kind of no otherness theory, right? Like all the ways in which they ever conceive of the gods or the Godhead, or the notion that the universe itself is sacred, or that the universe itself is the sublime or is God. God is inside that same reality. Now, is God subjected to all the same sets of karmas, like conditions and terms and consequences? Then you got to ask around. Like, we'll have different opinions about that. But it's what we would call a closed universe, meaning no second thing. It's not like there's a universe and then there's a creator. So the creator-creation relationship, we would call that, sorry for the fancy terms, but it's ontological, that is talking about being, dualism, because there's two things. There's creation and then there's a creator. Ontological dualism almost doesn't, it's virtually not existent in Hindu thinking. So they may end up with a potter or with a God that's in the world that can do things we can't do, or can even in some sense break the rules, or break our rules, or may not be subject to our rules, but in some sense belongs to the whole. Does that make sense? And it's going to kind of it's going to work that way. Let me fast forward again because I didn't answer the kind of the interesting question. Because later Hindus really do have an answer to why God created the world. And the first answer is for fun, like literally to play. And that is the universe fashioned itself to experience itself. Right? God didn't make the world for a reason or a purpose or a goal. It fashioned itself to experience itself. And human experience is one of the ways in which the universe can experience itself. And the argument is the universe wanted to know what it was like to be human. Well, isn't that an interesting idea? Right? So and the universe may want to know what it's like to be a cobra or anything else. Right? But the universe doesn't need a reason, a purpose, or a goal because it doesn't have a plan. It doesn't need a plan, right? So it's always going to puzzle me because I grew up kind of adjacent to the Episcopal Church. It's a weird thing. My own personal experience. My mother was Catholic. My father was Presbyterian. Anyway, and so Protestants think God's got a plan. That depends like where you are on the scale of Protestant thinking to think that God's got a plan. But on the kind of right side of that equation, just to get into the weirdness of our own politics, if God's got a plan, then on the evangelical side, your job is to figure out God's plan. Like God's got a plan for me. That's like that can end up pretty bad. Like it can end up pretty scary, right? Catholic thinking, just to make a footnote here in the history of religions, doesn't really deal with God's plan that way. God does have a plan, but you can't really know it. Right? It's a little bit more like Job. Like God's got a plan, but but here's another, let's go there because I just mentioned Job because it's an interesting point. So if the universe wants to experience itself, that's all it's really doing. It's simply constructing causalities in ways in which it's choosing to experience itself, right? Because what would it be like to be human? You're going to get fantastic later myths of characters who turn up as representations of the universe experiencing itself. Characters like Krishna, right? Mythically. And you'll see Krishna dancing with the girls, or Krishna falling in love with a cow maiden, and all these other stories. Well, he wants to know what it's like to be human. So, and you can't, and of course, to be human is to have the array of all of these sacred gifts. The most sacred of gifts is love. But the shadow of love, the necessary karmic consequence of love, we all know is grief. Right? To dare to love is to invite grief. And to grieve, and that's how you know how much you loved, because of how much you can grieve. And so, and who wants the grief? But that's the cost of love. So in a certain sense, that's the proposition before us. The universe experiencing itself comes with karma. That is, all of these sorts of ways in which one thing turns into another, and all the conditions that make it happen, and all the consequences of that. But in its experience of itself, in some sense, it has light and shadow, first sacred point. And things that look like shadows, things that are hidden from us, or things that we're not particularly happy we have, say grief or anger or fear, are also features of our light. They're features of the wonder and beauty of being human. They're celebratory, they're sacred. And so that first category of the sacred is that you can't have one without the other. And then the question, then the sorting out questions of the subtle body and of yoga, that is how we're going to engage this, like how we're going to hook up to this, is that is that if you want the light, you're going to get the shadow. And those are causes and consequences that, and then some of it you can figure out because you can test it, you can verify it, we can know things now that we didn't know then, right? There's that Veda word again, that verify word. And some of the things were just given to us. And then the next principle is that the immensity of it all, just the vastness of time and the immensity of the universe itself means that it's less mysterious than it is just unknowable. Does that make sense? Like it's just too much. It's too vast, right? So it doesn't mean that you can't know it. It means you're not going to, right? And plus, in the karmic sense, we're all likely to lose the thread, right? I think I told you this last time, but Ancestry sent me one of those like update things. And one of my cousins found out that my great grandfather is buried in a churchyard in the Orkneys. Like, that's like way up in the North Sea on the far end of like crazy Scotland. And I got a photograph of this guy's graveyard. And I'm like, that's my fourth great grandfather? And like, was a Viking? Like, the hell? You know, William Den Gunnar Johansson. Den Gunnar is the Duncan, and Den Gunnar is Duncan. That's my grandmother's name. Anyway, but yeah, who knew, right? But that's karma. But sooner or later, like Mormons notwithstanding, you're gonna not know you're gonna lose the thread. Like that ancestry thing's gonna fall apart, right? And we're not gonna, and so we're not disconnected. It's just that the knowable is unknown to us. Because someone was your fourth great grandfather. That's what I said to myself. Like someone had to be, right? Because that shows us that we're here. Okay, so the first set of Veda of knowing things, the first is to just say yes to a sacred universe. Then the sorting process is no small matter, right? Because how much of it is your doing? How much of it was done without your permission or consent? You know, like I don't remember the fateful night, but I was conceived. You know, like, and what are the consequences of living in the human condition? And how much of that can we know? Why are we here? I think from the very beginnings, the poetry is going to say, we're here because it's a blessing, because the universe offers itself as a blessing to itself. It wants to experience itself. There's some deep implication that and that, again, it doesn't have to do it for a reason or for a goal. It just can do it. Now it also there is addressing an issue that, let's take an issue that it takes out of the equation from the beginning, because it's really an important question, right? And it goes back to that creator-creation matter. Because if you start in a creator-creation, you're going to end up in the book of Job. Right? Because you're going to end up with the fancy word in the history of religions is theodicy. Does everyone know that word? Theodicy, Theodicy. That's the fancy word for the problem of evil. Oh. And meaning, why do bad things happen to good people? Just do it that way, right? And then think about the word, like it's such a cool word, because it's theodicy, it's God dictates, like God decides. So, and I've always been fascinated by the answer in Job. Now, don't mistake me, because I could get in trouble with the rabbi, but let me get in trouble anyway. Can I do that? Because I kind of hear Job's voice as sort of like this guy I used to know. Kind of talked a little bit like the Godfather. So Job goes, so Job's a good guy, and why do bad things happen to good people? Well, if there's a God, then that made the world, even if you don't know why, right? And that God could have made any world. Then you've got a claim on that God. Like, okay, so why do bad things happen to good people? You could have made the world another way. Like, I'd like to have words with you. Like, why did you do this? Now, this is an interesting question because, again, Hindus don't have an other God that's responsible for the world. It just has a God that's experiencing the world, right? And the premise there is, if you want the good stuff, you get the bad stuff, right? If you want the love, you get the grief. Or you're gonna get the anger or the fear, and even though you're gonna think of those as vices or as problems, they're necessary assets. Like you gotta have them. Sorry. Job gives you a different kind of answer, right? Like, so, God says, you only come to me when bad things happen. And you don't count your blessings first. And then I went to divinity school, so I had to go through this. And then he goes, hey, and sorry. I just kind of hear God this way. I like to do everything in voices, so please don't be offended. It's sort of how my inner state wants to think of this as okay. So God first goes, hey, you only come to me when bad things happen, but otherwise, hey, it's all much to your blessing. Then he says, well, look, it's a mystery, and I have a plan. It's a mystery. And then the last thing he goes, I'm God. You're not. Sorry. Like, in other words, you gotta, because the odyssey, God says, right? And in the mystery and in the greatness of it, there's a receptivity and a reconciliation that God's mercy and God's presence is a blessing. And that's kind of how the story ends there. Right? But it does kind of lay agency into the problem. Does that make sense? If God made the world, why did God make this kind of world? Now, Hindus, here back in this ancient poetry, have a very different idea about how the universe is doing its business. Namely, that it's coming for all of the experience, better and for worse. And it gives us so much agency, not just free will, that we can abuse the blessing. So instead of having evil, almost all of the mythologies and poetry lead us to the notion that when people are really evil, they're fundamentally isolated, selfish. It's almost like it's a malignant narcissism. Because again, the argument is we're all connected. The argument is we're all necessarily features of all of these relationships. And if I could do this to someone, that I would have to see them as other. I would have to see them as separate. I would have to see them as not connected to me. Right? So it's a basic violation of the very concept of yoga. We are connected. We are engaged. We're in it together. And to misuse that or to abuse that or to redound just to your own selfish desires or needs, that's where evil lands. And that's where like all the demon stories are basically stories about like what are demons? They're characters in stories whose self-interest overrides their decency. Essentially, that's how the story goes. Because everyone has self-interest. Like everybody's, you talking to me? You want from me? Like everybody's got them. And it's not criminal to be self-interested. It's criminal to dissemble and dissociate your connections with the bigger world and with each other. And with community, and so it goes like that.
Do they use the word, probably not the word, but like devil? I mean, talking about demons, but.
Yeah, well, no, not really, because again, it's not quite a problem of evil. It's a problem of misuse, abuse, misunderstanding.
Human.
Yeah, right, and it's not a fall from grace either. It's just another possibility. And in a world of possibilities, they're choosing those that advance their self-interest over all other considerations. So us and them, better and worse. It's a very slippery slope to I can do anything to you. To otherness, please.
So you talked about dualism and how the Hindus don't really relate to that.
Right. They don't really relate to it as if there were two. Let me put it another way. No matter how many universes there are, or how many things that's seen and unseen, because they're going to layer worlds. So it's not just the world we're seeing, because we're seeing human worlds.
I'm just thinking about how is it that Hindus are violent,
Right.
treat other people
Right.
horribly.
Right.
That speaks of dualism to me.
Yeah, it does. Right. And here's a good history of religion's principle. Whatever religion says it is also its shadow.
Is it what?
Also its shadow. It's also its shadow. So like, the people who talk about love, got some serious love issues. Okay, can we be honest about that, right?
Same thing.
Yes, exactly. Like whatever I think you're, I mean, I'm overstating the case, but I think
Yeah.
whatever it is, your thing, that's probably not just your Achilles heel, it's probably your shot. And I think that, but Hindus are navigating a world of competing interests rather than good and evil. That's a different way of thinking about it. And in those competing interests, and interestingly, what's sad about that, and your point is so well taken, is that another feature of the sacred in Hindu world is that it's never a zero-sum game. Right? It's never like if I get mine, you don't get yours. So there are goddesses you'll see with coins falling out of their hands, and the goddess there, her name is Lakshmi, and that word means characteristic or feature, right? But it also means prosperity or bounty. And so if I get plenty, there's no reason why you can't have plenty. It's just never a zero-sum game. So, but when you treat it that way, that's going to be called demonic, right? Because we go back here in the early. I'll give you another way of thinking about it. And then you'll remember because this was funny because we went through the same era. Remember the bumper sticker that said Jesus saves, Moses invests, Bhagawan spends. So this was a reference to the cult leader Rajneesh in the 80s and 90s. He was horrible, right? They're all horrible. So to the last, right? And it was kind of funny, but kind of true, right? So the idea of Jesus saves, Moses does, Bhagawan spends. The word Bhagavan, that's where I wanted to go, is, and you've heard the text called the Bhagavad Gita, right? Like the song of the Blessed One, the song of the Bhagavan. So Bhagavan is usually translated the Lord or the Blessed One, but the word Bhaga goes all the way back to this ancient poetry. It's the verb to share, to participate. It's the verb for bounty and for sharing. And back here in the ancient Vedic poetry, the question of goodness is a question of having your share. Like, does everyone get a share? And life is a share in a blessing. So Bhagavan means literally possessed of the portion, of a portion. You got a portion of life. Like, you know how, I'm sure you did this as a kid too, like you walk through the cemetery and you go, this was their share. Like here was their life. Right? And some people have a group like a better luck than that, or their karma, we don't know, right? But you're wishing everyone their share. And the purpose of the poetry was to reinforce the notion that that's what we're here to do. Now, as you correctly point out, Hindus seem to be bad at this. At which point I would say, yep. Welcome to humankind. Like, welcome to the difference between their ideals and values and how people really live their lives. Like, there's just it's never it would be dispiriting if it weren't just so true that you kind of just throw your hands up in the air and say, I'm still glad we have the values. Whether or not we live up to them is another matter, right? Mm-hmm. But let us see here that the Lord is literally you having your share of the experience of the world, your share of the blessing of life. Now that's going to take us from what we might call the sacred as the gift, the sacred as an ontology, like here's life, it's a blessing. Now what are you going to do? What are you going to do with your share? To another idea of the sacred that comes through the poetry. And we're going to call, and I want us to think of the sacred here as organizing the world. I want to call it locative, as in, I'm going to use the word kind of location. But this poetry is gonna take up three big ideas about the sacred: time, space, and identity. It's very abstract, sounds very philosophical. Let's make it easier. Time, now and then, space, here and there, identity, this and that. To understand the sacred is to take those three issues, here and there, now and then, this and that, and to give them their share, or to put them in the right place. So, okay. Anyone the parent of boys particularly? Does anyone have boys? My mother. Let's use my mother as an example. So, little boy, I get up in the middle of the night. She knows where I'm going. The voice from the other room yells, "In the pot, please." Right? Because in the pot, sacred, out of the pot, profane. Right? Now, why now? Because you gotta go when you gotta go. So now, not then, here, not there, this, not that. So I'll give you a different example. So you're a reluctant teen, and it's Easter Sunday. Just let's pick on that because it's an easy one. And you have to go to church with your grandmother because it's the respectful thing to do. It's your family tradition, blah, 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 right? And on the way out, you're thinking, I really need a cigarette. But you don't light your cigarette, okay, let's go first. You don't light the joint from the Christ candle on the way out. Right? Because you wait for your Bic lighter. Because what's the difference between the candle on the altar and the matches in your pocket? Well, they're both a light. What makes this light not like that light? The sacred, exactly right. And what is the sacred? It's there, not here. It's then, not now. It's this, not that. And so a rose in a cornfield is a kind of weed because it's a thing out of place. So the second notion of the sacred to the Hindus is this appropriate? Because you'll know what inside the house, it's dirt. Outside the house, soil. Right? So even the words we use, the names we give, indicate the sacred from the profane. Now, then you're not only registering these as qualities, like you would do this here but not there. This is a good time, not a good time, right? Now you're involved in all those choices and judgments, like what's okay, what's not, right? You're also in a world where when you make those judgments, they have consequences, right? Now, in the earliest Hindu worlds, the universe is giving you all kinds of clues. And our relationship to the sacred isn't to obey a series of laws. It's to see that the universe, in some sense, is organizing itself as the sacred. It's going, do this here, don't do that there. Right? Which then later translates culturally and socially into laws. Right? So the human social cultural rules begin in a world that's going here, not there, now, not then, this, not that. And it's giving you a sense of identity and place and relationship. So the sacred is the gift of life, and the sacred are the relationships that orient you to that world of adjustments, adaptations, appropriateness. The Hindus are going to end up a kind of with an enormous kind of legalism, much like rabbinic Judaism, like an enormous legalism. Not that God gave it to us, because that's not how they think about it. They think about the universe gave it to us. And it didn't come down as a dictate of the God. It came out of Veda, a discerning relationship to here. This would be the better way to do that. Put this here, not there. When's a good time? When's a bad time? And then who am I? Becomes a question of where am I in this relationship? And that's why in Hindu world you get all kinds of vocabulary for like teachers and deference and rabbis and, well, take the word guru. The word guru is an interesting issue. It could take us to a story, right? So the word guru is related to the English word gravity, garima, right? So like it comes to mean teacher, much the way any one of those words means teacher. Rabbi, sensei in Japanese. So it's a deference to wisdom, to authority, to qualification, literally to credential, credo, liqueur, your heart, right? Courage, those are all the same word, right? Your creed is your heart, liqueur, en français, right? In Sanskrit, hridaya, they're all this shraddha, all the same word, like linguistically across all those languages, right? So when someone has credentials, you literally can put your heart into them. That's what they're doing. That's what that signifies. That they put their heart into it. And so the argument isn't just the qualifications, like did you do the degree? It is, do you trust them? Right? Like, how are you vested in them? It's one thing to have the degree on the wall. It's another thing to trust that they do it, right? So a credential is someone you can put your heart into. Now, the word guru is the word, so is the word for teacher, but I said it's related to the word gravity. You know, why? Because under that canopy of the sky, life as a sacred event is a blessing. It's a gift. And you have to sort it out. It's relationships, here, not there, this, not that. But it's karma, much of which you don't control. And it is limited and conditioned because your portion is mortal over a course of time, right? And the sky delivers the weather. And as we said last time, the old Hindu word for suffering, dukkha, the first of the Buddhist noble truths, literally means bad sky. And sukha means happiness, good sky. And their ancestors, of course, were on those vast plains of Central Asia, looking up, you know, like it's Kansas, at the sky, you know, and everything comes from the sky, right? And what kind of a world are you in? You're in a world that's a blessing, but it's also dangerous, threatening, precarious. When the Hindus look at the world, they're from Rochester. Don't like the weather? Wait a minute. Right? And unprepared and poorly connected, bad yoga, it's cold, wet, rainy day. Bad yoga, freeze to death. Get it? Like make a bad connection. Don't apportion yourself properly. Don't sort out the relationship. Bad consequences, right? But so the world is a blessing, but the world's also going to like do what it does. Because here's the next feature. It is that karma isn't a moral category. It's not, the world isn't good or evil. It's cause and effect. We lay claim to good and evil. We like this, we don't like that. The world has moral implications, right? Because we assess the world. We assess that relationship and we say that's too selfish, that's evil, right? But it's just a relationship of power, desire, interest, advantage, success. The world, for the ancient Hindus, is morally neutral. It's morally neutral. We're not. So we can bring morality to it. We can bring good and evil to it. But the world itself isn't good or evil. It just does what it does. Which means look out. Because it could kill you. Like in a heartbeat.
It'd be a cobra.
Right, exactly. It's dangerous. So the same life that's a blessing is dangerous, threatening, and precarious all the time. And is never not dangerous, threatening, and precarious. As we all know, anything could happen to any of us at any moment. And for what looks like no good reason at all. But certainly not because the world has a plan or that it is good or evil. They don't want that. They just want to go, because stuff happens. So is this interesting at all? We haven't.
It's really interesting.
Okay. I'm not fishing for compliments. Still want to bore you today. We can do other stand-up if you like. I mean, I'm a president. All college professors are frustrated comedians. So at least they should be, damn it. So if I can't entertain you, if I can't educate you, at least I'll try to entertain you. So okay, so if we're living in a morally indifferent world, does that make sense? Like, it's not making judgments. We're the ones making judgments. Then, but part of that argument is now the judgment making is up to you. Because the world isn't going good or evil. The world isn't inflicting itself on you. It's inviting you to figure it out. Right? And it's not testing you, do good. It's inviting you to a greater sense of power, desire, interest, advantage, success. It's inviting you to create a sense of a blessing, a portion, a bhagavan, a share. And the basic thesis is that when you're disconnected or narcissistic, that's a form of separation, right? That would literally be bad yoga. Like you're just not connected well enough. Because what you find out is we can't do individually what we can do collectively. We can't do for ourselves what we could better do with each other. It's the basic claim, right? So are we any good at that, or we violate that? Is that, if that's our ideal, do we live up to that? Of course not. People suck. That's another thing. Like, we know that happens, right? But the idea is that these poets come to us with questions about what kind of a world we're in. And they begin in a query that sees it as a process of learning and knowing, of Veda, okay, of experimentation. So the earliest songs of the Veda don't give us one creation story or one origin story. They're almost all themselves posed not in the forms of answers or solutions, but they're posed in forms of Veda, that is, asking the interesting question. So instead of giving us the answer to why we're here, I live out in Bristol, and I ride the bicycle everywhere. And I pass this evangelical church. Outside, it says, "We have the truth. We teach certainty." And every time I ride by, they go. Because it's exactly the opposite of this strategy. Which is that, because as my Hindu teacher used to say, the only thing more dangerous than ignorance is certainty. Right? And that comes from this poetry. So the sense of the poet isn't to tell you the way the world is. The sense of the poet is to ask the interesting questions about the way the world is. And instead of giving you the answer, make the question more interesting. That is, keep advancing the question rather than indoctrinating the solution, right? So that's the strategy we'll see here. So the first of these is very interesting and fun. We've got extra copies. But this is Rig Veda 10.129. So these are all, so the Rig Veda, let me just give you a little bit more history of the poetry, is 1,028 of these songs. They were committed to memory. So, and they're written in verse, and they're all attributed to one, every song is attributed to a sage. Okay, so that's not like, and that sage doesn't speak for another character, that sage speaks from the cosmos. So the Veda is called, the word they use for this process, they call it Shruti, which means listening. So instead of telling you what the world is, remember, the world is making us. So in their view, they're listening for the questions that the universe is asking. And what they hear is what makes them sagely. So there are 1,028 of these songs. They're divided into 10 books. And historically, there were about 1,500 to 1,000 before the Christian era. This comes from the latter portion of the Veda, which doesn't much affect it. The language is fascinating and very, very old. So this is the language that is the antecedent to the classical language of the Hindus, which is Sanskrit, of course. You can be a very good Sanskritist and not read Veda. The same way you can be a good Shakespearean but not read Beowulf. Does that make sense? This is a very old language. So, right, okay, stop here.
It does refer to the one though.
Yeah, no, hang on, we're getting there.
Oh.
We'll get there. I'll go there. Right? But the Sox are playing Yankees tonight. Sox fan. My Vedic teacher was an Austrian guy at Harvard, who was a diehard Red Sox fan, but he had Arnold Schwarzenegger's accent. So like thick Austrian accent. And he was a delightful, lovely guy. His name was Yoki Schindler. Professor Schindler used to wear a tweed, like he was Oxford, he was like a Harvard guy, right? Like 50s. So like the Oxford button down, the bow tie, the tweed jacket, and the Sox cap. But he taught me Veda. The non-existent, this is my translation, by the way. So, and there are a million others. So if you take this home and you look, this is such a famous hymn that you can find dozens of translations online. The non-existent did not exist, nor the existent at that time. There existed neither airy space nor heaven beyond. What moved back and forth? From where and in whose protection? Did water exist unfathomably deep? Notice that I'm going to ruin a good story by interpreting it, because that's the other thing college professors do. And notice how he immediately went from a speculative, he went from a speculative view, like a projection of ideas, to a series of questions, and not to a series of answers. Like he doesn't think he knows. Death did not exist, nor deathlessness then. There existed no sign of day, not night nor day. That one breathed without wind, breathless by its own will. There existed nothing else beyond. Okay. So the only assertion we get, this you got it right away, that one, the capital T and O1, this is the term tad ekam in Sanskrit. So ekam, you can hear the word one there, because eka is one in Sanskrit. Right? And tad is the impersonal pronoun. So it doesn't say he, doesn't say she, it just says that. Okay, so it doesn't project gender on the world, because he literally told you it's before death and deathlessness. You can only die, you die in gender, right? And he only told us that one, he didn't say that one, he hasn't told us anything more about that one, except he does seem to be saying that you wake up to a world and see many things. No matter how many things you see, you are in a universe. You're in a one thing. Okay. Now, is he preaching a oneness doctrine? Like it's all one? Is he preaching the oneness became manyness? Hasn't told us any of that yet, right? He's just said that there's nothing else. He's just said there was that one. Right? Why did it do it? He says, without breathless by its own will. That is, he didn't say it was for a reason. He didn't say he wanted anything. He just said, this is how it happened. Darkness existed, hidden by darkness in the beginning. As this was a signless ocean. What existed is the thing coming into being, concealed by emptiness. That one was born by the power of heat. And it's very kind of, again, poetically interesting lines. And I'm not particularly messing with the translation. This is almost literally what it said. He seems to be accounting for all the possibilities of the world. And he's giving us a mark that much later on is going to tell us, with the light comes the shadow, with the love comes the grief. With the light comes the darkness. And that more, and we're going to get a persistent image here of remember, we're asking, what do we know? We're going to get a persistent image here of things that are hidden or things that we don't know, right? So much of this has been interpreted as mystery. You might think of it more as like horizon. That is, we can see as far as we see, and then we don't see further. Then in the beginning, from thought there arose desire, which existed as the primal semen. Searching in their hearts, though inspired, should say through inspired thought, my error, poets found the connection between existent and non-existent. Their cord was stretched across. Did something exist below it? Did something exist above? There existed places of semen and there existed greatnesses. There was independent will below, offering above. Okay, so it's really wonderfully sort of strange and oblique. Let's think about what he wants to say. He wants to say that there's some essential creative power in the world, right? And they're going to, of course, encode that in sexual fluid. They're going to also encode this as a process of friction, of heat, of generative quality, right? So again, and we're on the edge of yoga because what we're talking about is connection, right? So the world is vast, it's connected by a cord, and what does it do? It rubs, it makes contact, it makes connection. This text doesn't use the word yoga, it's coming, just within a series of other moments, it's coming. Right, so how does the world happen? It happens when it doesn't simply, and notice that it both explodes and makes connection. So it's got three things. It explodes, it makes connection, and it connects. So it's moving in through three ways. It's moving from, because it's expanding. It's moving towards, it's coming together. And it's postulating a connection between the two, a cord between the two, right? So later Hindus are going to call this a pulsation theory. They're going to say the universe is like a human heart. It does this, and then it does that. And that's where they're going to bring back into yoga the breath, because the breath does this, and then it does that. So the metaphor of contraction and expansion, of coming together and falling away, it's going to describe the power that creates life. Right? Because what does life do? It gathers together and then it explodes. It falls apart, both in the sexual act and in birth and in the way life acts. So there's a later Hindu commentary on this that's really fantastically interesting because I was reading it a couple summers ago, and so I'm standing in we have ponds on our land in Bristol. You know, there's ponds everywhere. And they're all human made. I don't know if you know that. Like so I'm standing in the pond. We have this invasive species cattails. That's it. So you got to pull the cattails out, or at least try to get some of them out. You don't really want to poison the pond. Anyway, I'm standing in the pond pulling out cattails, and it's a gruesome, horrible job, and the cattails are determined to root, not get pulled out, right? And they're determined they've got a cord, and they don't want, because everything wants to live, nothing wants to give itself up, right? And I look down, and there are leeches in the pond.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So I got the rake, and I go like this, and you can see like they go, run away. It's like a Monty Python joke. Like the leech is like, hey Mikey, you seen Vinny? Like there's this guy in the pond. Like so they're coming towards or they're coming away. That's exactly what he just said. Life is only doing two things, towards and away. It's either coming for you or it's retreating. Right? It's doing this. And the essential cord is, why is it doing it? The case of the leeches, it's really great because they're not doing that. They're not going, hey, Mikey, you seen Vince. They're not doing that. They're like schooling fish or flocking birds. They're responding to each other, but it's light and heat and connection. It's instinct, right? It's not choice. That's what he's saying. Their cord was stretched across. Did something exist below? Did something exist above? Like who's doing this? There existed places of semen and there existed greatnesses. Now, greatness is going to come to be a really important idea for Hindus. It's the word maha. It's our word magnificent. So it's the same word as there.
That's like Mahatma.
Yes, great soul, right? But the question would be, what make one soul greater than another? The later Hindus have a very interesting answer to this. Greatness is what changes the question. So, because there's two kinds of questions. Success and greatness. Success is a zeros and one. Did you do it or did you not do it? Right? So in a karmic sense, it happened or it didn't happen. Greatness is asked the question, happened, didn't happen, was it worth it? So it changes the question from success to value. We all do this. It's like, what's marriage, but was it worth it? Because you have good days and bad days. You can be successful, you can be failing, but is it worth it? Because then you have to have both and neither. And somehow you're asking a value question rather than asking just a zeros and one question. So this is the prompt for that later consideration. So what makes Mahatma Gandhi a great soul? It's that his soul, his soulfulness, his essential being, raises the question of value, not just success. So it's not value instead of success, because value is a success and failure proposition. You win some, you lose some. Is it worth it? That's where it comes from. And this is the prompt for that. Because the world is filled not just with did we get him or did we not get him? It's filled, is it worth it? We're making that kind of deeper connection. Who really knows? Who shall proclaim it? From where was it born? From where this creation? The gods on this side of creation, of this world. So then, who does know who? So then, who does know from where it came to be? The sentence really does read like that. Because as we're going to see, the who there is going to be another way of talking about God. Not he, saha, but who. God's a question. This creation, from where, this is the most famous line, 7. This creation, from where it came, if it was made or not, the overseer of this world in the furthest heavens surely knows. Or if he does not know. And the text is kind of content to spin you through this sort of allegory of connection, this allegory of heat and light and friction and darkness and hidden and revealed. It's willing to kind of spin you through the question of value and judgment. It's willing to speculate, is there someone, is there not someone who did this? Is there agency? Is there reason or purpose? And then it ends and says, in effect, that one, maybe it knows, but if it doesn't know, so leaving it in this sort of fantastically open-ended world is where the Hindus are going to start.
All right. Wow.
Was that fun?
Yeah.
We were supposed to end at 8:30, so I.
So has written on something.
Oh, okay, so no, this was recited and memorized for the better part of 5,000 years before it was written.
Oh, so it was like
They say it shouldn't.
We've got all kinds of
oral.
ways of doing it. I'll tell you more about it later. Writing it down was considered less verifiable than sharing it and speaking it.
So was it oral?
The oral. If they memorize the syllable by syllable,
Oh.
$500,000 of it.
I reacted very strongly to your comment.